All right, Chava, say good morning. Good morning. Sorry, let us begin. We have first of all, good chodesh to everyone. We have a beautiful, beautiful daf ahead of us today. Today's daf is Kuf Yud Daled 114, and we are picking up in Meretz Hashem on Kuf Yud Gimel on the days 113b, and we are picking up Hayed Rabbi Yochanan, which is 2, 4, 6, 8 lines down from the 8 lines up from the bottom. Sorry. Give me one moment here. 8 lines up from the bottom. So I will say the Gemara says as follows. Really beautiful, beautiful sugya. Sorry, just getting situated here. Okay. Heyid Rabbi Yochanan. So remember again, just to reorient ourselves a little bit, Rabbi Yochanan said in the Mishnah, Ala chareshes shesia avia sheyotze beget. That a chareshes, a woman who is deaf mute, whose father married her off, so she has the ability to go ahead and leave a marriage through a get. Now, remember again, well, just to explain this case. This particular case is, this is a girl whose father is marrying her off. Therefore, again, it's kiddushay d'oraisa. And therefore, again, Rabbi Yochanan ben Gudguda says that should she and her husband choose to divorce, or should her husband choose to go ahead and divorce her, halacha l'maisa, ultimately, again, she gets divorced with a get. So, good. That was Rabbi Yochanan ben Gudguda. So it says the Gemara, based on the statement of Rabbi Yochanan ben Gudguda, Amar le'edim ru'u get zeh shani nosi, v'amar la kinsi shtar chov zeh. Very interesting case. Let's say a man is divorcing his wife, and he says to the witnesses, see this get that I'm about to give to my wife. This is the get about to give to my wife. But what? V'amar la. But yet, when he gives her the document, he says to her, "Kinsi shtar chov zeh, acquire this document of indebtedness. Acquire this loan document." So we'll say, what's happening in this case? The husband is telling the Eidim that this is a get. He's telling her this is a get. But when he gives it to her, he tells her, "Oh, this is a loan document." Okay, so she picks it up thinking that it's a loan document. Surprise, it's a get. It's a get. So what's the halacha? Harezi migureshes. Ultimately, again, she is migureshes, i.e. the get works, even though when she received it, at the end of the day, she thought she was receiving a loan document. Now it turns out that she got a get, to which the Gemara says, so I will say, what is this based on? Well, this is based on the fact that when a woman receives her get, you don't need her das, you don't need her consent, and you don't need her intent. Just like Rabbi Yochanan ben Gudguda said, that a father goes ahead and marries off his daughter, right? He can go ahead and be makabel a get on her behalf, meaning that there need not be das on behalf of the woman when it comes to the get. So therefore, again, same idea. If man gives woman a get, he says to the Eidim, it's a get. He says to her, this is a loan document, and she's makabel it based on the idea that it's a loan document. Halacha l'maisa, she is migrashes. It works. It works. To which the Gemara says as follows: Pshita, Malditim, what would you have thought? It's obvious. Well, so in other words, again, we got it. We don't need a woman's consent or her intent for a get. As we saw in yesterday's daf, the only thing you really need is that she has the ability to physically receive the get and at least guard it on some basic level. So Malditim, what would you have thought? Batuli batle. So I might have thought like this. I might have thought in this case, where he gives her the document and he says to her, here is a loan document, I would have thought that perhaps that is the equivalent of a husband being mevatel the get. That again, he says to the Eidim, this is a get. And then when he gives it to her, he tells her, here's a loan document. I might have thought that what's really happening over here, the husband himself is being mevatel the get. He's negating the get. Kamash malon, no. So no, because the Gemara says if he was being mevatel the get, which a husband does have the ability to do, technically speaking, the husband before the husband gives the wife a get, he has the ability, even though he wrote it and even though he told witnesses he's going to give a get, if he has not yet given it to her, he has the ability to nullify it. To which the Gemara says, because if he was going to nullify it, he would have said that to the witnesses. In other words, he wouldn't have said to the witnesses, I'm giving my wife a get, if it was his intention to be mevatel the get. To which the Gemara says, so why did he tell her then, here's a loan document? In other words, if he's telling the Eidim, I'm giving my wife a get, and his intention is not to be mevatel the get. So then, why is it that when he hands it over to the Eidim, he said, when he hands it over to his wife, or to his soon-to-be ex-wife, he says, "Oh, this is a loan document." To which the Gemara says, "Machmas kisufahu dekamarlo." He's embarrassed. He's embarrassed. For whatever the reason, he's embarrassed to give his wife a get. Maybe he's embarrassed for her, he's embarrassed for the witnesses, whatever it might be. And therefore, in order to, minimize his embarrassment, he goes ahead and he tells her, here, this is a loan document. But Allah, take away from this, based on Rabbi Yochanan ben Gudgada in our Mishnah, is that you don't have to have a woman's das when you go ahead and give her get. To the point, ultimately, again, that if she thinks that she is receiving a loan document, but instead the husband goes in and gives her a get, halacha l'maisa, the get is effective. Rabbi Yitzchak bar Bisna, Irkus ulei maftechei debei midrasha b'shus harabim b'shapsa. It was a very interesting case. Rabbi Yitzchak bar Bisna lost his keys to the Beis Medrash on Shabbos. He lost his keys. So now, what's the problem? He knows where he lost his keys. He knows where he lost his keys, right? But Allah says in Rosh Hashanah, so now he's unable to go ahead and get it back. So what does he do? So he comes before Rabbi Pedas, and Rabbi Pedas says to him, Amarle, Zeal, top of Kof Yod Daled. Zeal. So I don't have a stable internet where I am. My apologies if it goes in and out a little bit. I'm sorry. So the Gemara says, "Come to Rabbi Pedas," and Rabbi Pedas says to him, "Zeal debar tali v'talyo v'letaylu hasam." So listen to this eitzah. Rabbi Pedas says to Rabbi Yitzchak bar Bisna, "Go take the children out to play. Go take the children." Right, literally again, bar tali v'talyo means young boys and young girls. Go ahead and take them. First line on Kuf Yud Daled Amud Aleph. Go ahead and take them to play in the Rosh Hashanah. Ultimately, again, what will happen if they're going to play? And while kids are playing, they inevitably stumble upon things. They'll find your keys, right? They'll find your keys, and halacha l'maisa, they'll give you the keys. Okay, so you'll go ahead and you'll be able to find the keys. Which the Gemara says, so we'll say, so what's happening over here? This is actually quite fascinating. So Rabbi Yitzchak bar Bisna lost the keys, asks Rabbi Pedas for an eitzah, and Rabbi Pedas essentially tells him, go take the kids to play. Take them in Rosh Hashanah. They'll find the keys, and they'll bring you the keys. To which the Gemara says, Alma Kasavar. So we'll say, what does he hold? Now, again, it must be that what does Rabbi Pedas hold? So we'll say, I just want to point out, what's going to happen over here? The kids are going to find the keys. Then what are the kids going to do? They're going to carry the keys through the Rishus Harabim. So essentially what's being set up over here is the kids are being set up to go ahead and do something that's not within not the spirit, not within the halacha of Shabbos. So I will say, what do you see from here? Says the Gemara. So the Gemara says, Alma Kasavar, you see from here that halacha l'maisa, what does he hold? Katan ochal nevelos ein bezdin mitzuvin lahafrisho. I will say, what do we see from here? We see from here that halacha l'maisa, if a child is eating something not kosher, ultimately, again, bezdin is not obligated to separate him from this. Now, I will say, we're going to get into this sugya now, and this is really quite fascinating. Here's the fundamental shayla. If you see a child doing something halachically wrong, is an adult obligated to go ahead and intervene and stop the child from doing it? Now, obviously, we're talking about young children over here. Obviously, once a child reaches the age of chinuch, reaches the age of education, a parent has an obligation to ensure that halacha, the child lives, at least to the best of their ability, in accordance with halacha. But if a very, very small child who's not at the age of chinuch, and I see the child doing something wrong, are we obligated? The lashon is based in, right? Are we obligated to intervene and stop the child from doing the usher activity? So I will say, it seems from here, based on what Rabbi Pedas says to Rabbi Yitzchak, that the answer to that is No, because halacha l'maisa again here, Rabbi Peretz is telling Rabbi Yitzchak, take the kids to play Rosh Hashanah. Take them to play. Why are you taking them to play Rosh Hashanah? Why? Why? Because I want them to find the keys. When they find the keys, by definition, what does that mean? They're going to carry the keys through Rishus Harabim. And yet, halacha l'maisa, we're encouraging that. So let's say, bring a support to this. So let's bring a support to this. Lo yomer adam latinok haveli mafteach haveli chosam. So listen to this. A person should not go ahead and tell a child on Shabbos, bring me a key or bring me a seal, if by definition this will require the child to carry it through Rishus Harabim, a public domain. Ella manicho tolesh manicho zorek. So we'll say, but rather what? You can go ahead and leave it, and if the child uproots it, or he leaves it, or he throws it. What does this mean? Amar Abaye, Tolish. So we'll say the idea over here is, so we'll define that phrase in just a moment. Ella manicho tolish manicho zorik. You can leave it. If the kid uproots it, he uproots it. You can leave it. If the kid throws it, he throws it. So I will say, once again, what does this sound like? I can't actively instruct a child to go ahead and do something that is asur. But if the child does it on his own, then halacha l'maisa, I am permitted to go ahead and benefit from it. So I will say this seems to be a proof to Rabbi Pedas. So just to be clear, Rabbi Pedas is this opinion who is saying that halacha l'maisa, there is no problem. I don't have an obligation to stop a child from doing something that is asur. I can't actively facilitate. I can't actively command, but I can benefit from it once it's being done. To which the Gemara says that price is not a raya. Amar Abaye tolish pa'atzitz she'ein lo nakuv zorik b'kamas rabbanan. Abaye says that no, that's not a good raya, because that case actually that you just quoted could be dealing with dinei d'Rabbanan, rabbinic law. What's the case? The case is where the child is uprooting from an atzitz she'ein lo nakuv. We'll say atzitz she'ein lo nakuv is, we haven't actually seen this in a long time, an unperforated flower pot. So we'll say an unperforated flower pot, anything that's planted in there is not really considered to be attached to the ground because it's an unperforated pot. It's a self-contained, self-standing pot. So if a child were to uproot something, let's say you're growing something, they pull a cucumber out of that on Shabbos, technically that's an Isser D'Rabbanan, or a Carmelis, which is a large area that looks like a Rosh Hashanah, but is not, is only rabbinically prohibited. So the Gemara suggests maybe the Brisa is talking about where the katan is doing rabbinically prohibited activities. Maybe that's the case where if the katan does it, I, the adult, am not obligated to intervene. But perhaps in a da'araisa case, I would be obligated to intervene. So we'll say, let's go weiter. We're gonna talk about this more. So we'll say this is a very riveting sugya. So Rabbi Pedas is on record as saying that halacha l'maisa, although you can't instruct a child to do an avera, to do something that is asur, if the child is already doing it, and I, the adult, perhaps I'm the beneficiary of it, or even if I'm not the beneficiary of it, I have no obligation to intervene to stop them from doing. I can't ask the katan to do it. I can't command the katan to do it. But once they're doing it, I have no obligation to go ahead and intervene and stop them. So let's analyze. Tashma. Here we go. If a nadris was, let's say chas v'shalom, there's a fire in my house on Shabbos. So now what happens? My non-Jewish neighbor comes over and wants to put it out. So remember again, technically speaking, a Jew who has a fire in their house on Shabbos can't extinguish that fire. Now the truth is that's presupposing that the fire only poses a material risk and not sakanas nefashos, right? We know contemporarily, we have electricity, we have gas lines. If there's a fire in your house, every single fire is a sakana. Put it out. The Jew put it out yourself. Don't wait for a guy. Don't wait. But again, the Gemara is dealing with a case where technically speaking, let's say there's a fire in one's house and the only issue is a monetary loss. That's the only issue over is a monetary loss. So what's the halacha? So if an ovid kochavim comes along, I will say, I can't instruct him to extinguish the fire, but I also don't have to tell him not to extinguish the fire. So I can't tell him to do it because again, that's Amir al-Nachri. We'll speak to the Smichas Chaver guys. We spent a lot of time on Amir al-Nachri. So that's instructing a non-Jew to do malachas. I can't instruct him to do it, But at the same time, if he's coming of his own volition, I don't have to tell him to stop. I don't have to tell him to stop. To which the Gemara says, why? Because ultimately, again, I don't have an obligation to make sure, there's no obligation for me to ensure that the akum keeps Shabbos, right? In other words, there's no Shabbos for the akum. So if he's coming of his own volition, I can't tell him to put it out, but I also don't have to tell him to stop. However, katan habalachabos omlo al techabe sheshvisaso alehem. Oh, but if a katan comes along and wants to put out the fire, here I have to tell the katan to stop. The Rabbi say, why? Because I have an obligation to make sure that the katan keeps Shabbos. This seems to contradict Rabbi Pedas, because Rabbi Pedas is of the opinion that when a katan, keep on remember again, we're going to be focusing on this position of Rabbi Pedas, quoted on the last line of Kuf Yud Gimel Amud Beis 113b, where Rabbi Pedas said that if a katan is doing an avera, I don't have an obligation to intervene and stop him. Yet here the Gemara explicitly says, if the katan comes to put out the fire on Shabbos, I have an obligation to stop him. Why? Because again, I have to make sure the katan keeps Shabbos. I'm Rabbi Yochanan, no, it's a different case. Ba'osa al das aviv. Oh, we'll say, what's the case over there? When the kid shows up, he's putting out the fire. Why? Because he knows his father wants him to do it. He knows his father wants. Look at Rashi. But third line from the top of Rashi, Ba'osa al das aviv, shatino tzofe ba'aviv, the child is looking at his father, Veroa shenoach lo bekach, and the child sees that his father wants him to put out the fire. Va'aviv omeid alav, and the father is standing there. The Gemara says, "Dahavikilu hu mitzaveu lasos." It's as if the father is commanding his son to do this. So Rabbi said, this is incredible. First of all, what are you sowed? What's the case over here? The katan is coming to put out the fire. Why is he putting out the fire? Because he knows that this is what his father wants him to do. And ultimately, again, the father's standing there. So this is a case where the child is acting because he believes that this is what the parent wants them to do. If the child is doing this because this is what he believes the parent wants him to do, then what? It's as if the parent is instructing him. And even Rabbi Pedas agrees that you can't instruct a katan to do malacha. If the katan does it of his own volition, you don't have to stop him, but you can't instruct him. We'll say that's the case. I'll point out over here something so incredibly beautiful. I will say, if you look at the Lashon of Rashi, Rashi says over here, Shatinok tzofe ba'aviv v'rosh shenoach lo bekach. The tinok, the child, is looking at his father and he sees that my father wants me to put out the fire. We're saying, what does a child want more than anything? What does a child want more than anything? A child wants to please his father. A child wants to know that his father is happy with him. A child wants to know that his father is pleased with him. So therefore say, and by the way, it's not just true in Yevamos Kof Yudal Ramadalef. Each of us are children to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And about at the end of the day, what do I want most out of life? What do I want most out of life? I just want to know that my father is happy with me. Right? But isn't that what I want to know? I want to know that when you look down at me and you see my life and you see the way that I'm living, are you happy with me? Are you happy with me? See, at the end of the day, every child looks at his father. And I just want to see, when I look at my father, is my father happy with the person I have become? Is my father happy with the decisions I'm making? Is my father happy with what I am doing in life? Absolutely incredible. So therefore, Rabbi the Gemara says it's not a good raya, because again, here, it's as if the child is explicitly being instructed by the father. To which the Gemara said, the kavase gabi ovi kocham be'osa das yisrael mishari. So Rabbi say, because again, same idea. That's why, by the way, halacha l'maisa. What about by Ovid Kochavim? Let's say an Ovid Kochavim shows up. So we just said before that as long as I'm not instructing the Ovid Kochavim to put out the fire, he's acting on his own volition, and that's fine. But why don't I have the same worry over here? That Allah Lamaisa, the Ovid Kochavim will see that I'm happy with what he's doing, and Lamaisa again, it's as if he's acting on my behalf. To which the Gemara says, no. Ovid Kochavim adaite denafshe Ovid. I will say again, without getting into all of the halachos of Amira Lenachri, which again, you'll speak to this Minchas Chaver Chavra. We learned this already. We assume that unless explicitly instructed, the Ovid Kochavim is operating for his own benefits. Whether he knows he's going to get, Rashi says over here, Afilu below Yedias, Ovid Kochavim is Kavin Lanasa Shtei Sheifel Schar. See, the Ovid Kochavim knows at the end of the day, when he puts out that fire in a Yiddish home, in a Jewish home, what's going to happen? He's going to get some nice reward. at the end of the day. Therefore, halacha l'maisa, what he does for his own benefit. Okay, Tashma. So we'll say, let's get back focused. We're still focused on one central idea. Rabbi Pidas said, Katan ochel nevelos ein beis mitzuven lafrisho. If I see a child doing an avera, Beis Din is not obligated to go ahead and intervene and prevent the child from doing the avera. So we'll say that's what we're focused on. To which the Gemara says, here we go, Tashma, ben chaver sheragelelech etzel avi imo amaretz. So let's say the following case. You have a chaver. We'll call him Yaakov. Yaakov is a chaver. Chaver means he's a Talmud Chacham, very careful with Trumas and Maasros. Okay, Yaakov has a son, Ruvain, right? Ruvain has a grandfather, right? He goes to his maternal grandfather. We'll call him Yitzchak, right? Yitzchak is an Amaretz. Yitzchak is an Amaretz, which means that he is not careful in Trumas and Maasros. So we'll say, so now you have the grandson, Ruvain, going to his grandfather, Yitzchak. Now what happens? So the halacha is that he can go in choshishin shemayachi lenu dvarim she'eno mitukanim. You don't have to worry, since Yitzchak, the grandfather, knows. Since the grandfather knows that his grandson, right, his son-in-law and his grandson are careful for Trumas and Maasros. So Yitzchak is going to make sure to have the kosher food. He's going to make sure that when he serves his grandson food, that he's going to serve him food that's properly tithed. So watch this. Matzah be'adoperos ein zakok. I will say, what happens if little Reuven comes home and his father Yitzchak finds that there are peros, right? And that ultimately, again, that there's fruit in his hand. So I will say, we don't have to worry. You don't have to take away the fruit from Reuven out of concern that maybe it's untithed produce. So I will say, what do you see from here? Chances are most produce is not tithed. And yet you see now Reuven, this kid, has potentially untithed produce. The Gemara says we're not obligated to step in and take out the produce away from him. So we'll say this seems to support Rabbi Pidas, because again, here you have a child potentially engaging in illegal activity, right? Sinful activity. And yet halacha is you don't have to stop him from doing so. To which the Gemara says, not a geraya, Amar Rabbi Yochanan b'demai. So we'll say, no, it could be that this is a case of demai. We'll say, remember again, what's demai? Demai is the produce of an amaretz. So the halacha is we make you retithe that produce, but that's only a din d'Rabbanan. Midaraisa, one is not obligated to do so. D'Rabbanan, we tell you to tithe it again. So once again, what do we see over here? That you could be makel with the cotton with the d'Rabbanan, but that doesn't tell me I can be makel with the cotton with the d'Oraisa. Ela taima de d'maihu. So we'll say it's only because it's demai. But if I knew for sure that Allah the cotton was holding untithed produce, real tavel, I would not just be able to allow him to eat it, but rather again I would be obligated to go ahead and retithe it. Rabbi Yochanan says, "Ba'osa al das aviv." But Rabbi Yochanan himself said in the previous case, "Ba'osa al das aviv." So we'll say it's interesting. In the previous case, Rabbi Yochanan said we're talking about a katan, ultimately again, who came to put out the fire, and he was doing it because he knew his father wanted to. So there it's aser. Here we're saying that Allah l'maisa, you don't have to take away the produce from it because you could just assume it's demai. So what's going on over here? Rabbi Yochanan sapuki misapkele. I will say here's very interesting. Rabbi Yochanan himself wasn't sure about the halacha. Do we follow Rabbi Pidas or don't we follow Rabbi Pidas? And therefore, again, kai hachamatri. Essentially, Rabbi Yochanan just tries to upschlag, just tries to refute every single proof. But his personal position, ultimately, again, is not clear. So I will say, so again, we're still exactly where we were. We have a statement of Rabbi Pidas. What's the statement of Rabbi Pidas? That halacha l'maisa, if you go ahead and you see a child committing an avera, Beis Din is not obligated, meaning adults aren't obligated to intervene and prevent him from doing so. That's all. You can let him do his thing. And probably not only that, even if I'm going to be the beneficiary of that avera, I'm still allowed to let him do it. I can't instruct him to do it, and I can't go ahead and non-verbally communicate to him that this is what I want him to do. And if it's clear that the kid is doing this on my behalf, I have to shut that down. So we're trying to see, is Rabbi Pidas correct or incorrect? So Tashma, here we go. Ben chaver kohen shragalelech etzel avi imo kohen ama aretz. So we'll say, if you have the son of a kohen right? Who's a chaver, which means this is a kohen, once again, who is very careful with tuman tara, very careful with all of the halachos. And this, right, but yet the kohen has a father-in-law who is also a kohen, who's an Ama Aretz. So the grandson could go to his grandfather, who is a kohen Ama Aretz, and in choshishin shema yachidana truma tmeya. We're not concerned that because the grandfather is an Ama Aretz, that he's going to come to feed his grandson truma tmeya. On the other hand, matzah biyado peiros. Similarly, again, if you go ahead and let's say the grandson comes back, and now you find peiros in the grandson's hand, ein zakuk, you don't have to take away the produce from him, and you need not be concerned that halacha lamaisa, maybe it's truma tmer, something else. So I will say once again, this seems to support Rabbi Padas, to which the Gemara says no, but truma derabanan. We could be talking about truma derabanan, and therefore I will say everyone agrees that when it comes to an isur derabanan, for sure there's no need to go ahead and separate the child from performing that. So still, let's go back there. Tashma, Yonik tinok v'holech. Supposed to listen to this. A child, a tinok is a very young child, could go ahead and nurse me'ovedes kochavim from a non-Jewish woman, me'behemet from a non-Jewish animal, ve'in choshishin biyonik sheketz. And I will say, and we're not concerned that the child is nursing from an impure source. It's an interesting case. Even though, again, you have a non-Jewish woman or a non-kosher animal, if the child nurses from the non-Jewish woman or the non-kosher animal, it's okay. We don't stop it. Even though, again, halacha l'maisa what? These are quote-unquote non-kosher sources. However, v'lo yachilenu nevelos trefas shkatzim v'ramasim. However, but halacha l'maisa, you can't actively feed the child something not kosher. So if the child goes on his own and nurses from the non-Jewish woman, nurses from the non-kosher animal, you don't have to stop it. But lamaisa, you can't actively feed the child something not kosher. Umikulan yonek mehem va'afilu b'Shabbos. And I will say you can nurse from any of these, right, either non-Jewish women or non-kosher animals, even on Shabbos. Even on Shabbos. I will say we're going to see that halacha lamaisa, so especially nursing from an animal on Shabbos, could be problematic. The issur of dash, of mefarik. We'll get into this in just a moment. Ubegadol, so we'll say in this case, gadol doesn't mean an adult like it normally means. In this case, gadol means an older child. That whereas a katan in this case, tinok, means a baby, so gadol means like a toddler. Someone a little bit older. Ubegadol aser, but a gadol ultimately, again, these things will be aser. Again, we'll see what that means in just a moment. Abba Shaul says, Abba Shaul said, we used to drink straight from the animal, right? Straight from the udder of the animal on Yom Tiv. Okay, we'll have to see what exactly is going on over there, right? But we'll come back to that case. So the Gemara says as follows. So the Katani Miha, so we'll say, what's our takeaway from this? In other words, what do I get from this Gemara? Katani Miha, ein choshishin biyonek sheketz. So we'll say, but what do you see from here? That if the child goes over to a non-Jewish woman and nurses, or more better for us, the child goes over to a non-kosher animal and nurses from the non-kosher animal, then Allah Chamais, you don't have to stop him. So what do you see from here? We'll say that's an issur d'oraisa. This is d'oraisa, again, eating non-kosher. So again, yet you don't have to stop the child. You don't have to stop the child. It seems to support Rabbi Padas, to which the Gemara says, no. Hasa mishum sakana. That's different. We're talking about a baby who needs to drink, who needs to eat. There's an element of sakana if the baby doesn't do so. So of course it's mutter. 1 second. Sakana. If that's the case, we're talking about sakana, then halacha l'maisi, even an older child should be permitted. We'll say something very interesting. Here's the difference. Gadol by umdina. So the Gemara says, here's the difference. A gadol, before you go ahead and you let a toddler eat something not kosher, you need a umdina. We'll say umdina means that halacha l'maisa, you need like an assessment. So first of all, both an assessment as to whether or not really the assessment is, does the child need the milk now, or could we wait after Shabbos and secure other sources of milk? That's really the fundamental question. Why doesn't the baby also require an assessment. To which Rav Yoshua, stam tinok mesukan eitzach achala. Very simple. When you have a baby, right, a baby needs milk. And if a baby doesn't get milk, that's considered to be an immediate sakana. Therefore, halacha lamaisa, again, the baby doesn't need a umdina. So therefore, I both say this case is not a proof trabipadas. We thought it was a proof trabipadas because here you have the baby nursing from a non-kosher source, right? And we don't have to shut it down. We don't have to shut it down. Kamash Milan, it's a case of sakana. Okay. To which the Gemara goes, Abishal says, so now we're going to get caught up a little bit in some of these other pieces. Abishal Omer Noagin Hayinush Yonkim Mehimatar B'Yamtiv. Abishal says we used to go ahead and nurse, right? Not nurse. We used to drink directly from the animal on Yamtiv. Sehechi Dami. What's going on over here? So Idi Ike Sakana. If there was sakana there, nothing else to eat. Okay, we'll say first wide line, Kof Yedalam and Aleph. Then Afilu B'Shabbos Nami. Then even on Shabbos, ultimately, again, such a thing should be permitted. V'dalaka sakana, and if there's no sakana, Afilu B'Yamtiv Aser. Ultimately, again, it should be Aser even on Yamtiv. L'tzicha Di'ikat Sara. I will say, what's the case? Ultimately, again, it is a case of tsar. It is a case of tsar. V'kasavar mefarik kila achar yad hu. And I will say, listen to this. So it's a case of tsar where there was tsar, there was discomfort. And I will say, remember again, the issue of milking an animal on Shabbos is an issue of mefarik, of dash, of threshing. Just to very quickly, just like when you thresh, you go ahead and you separate out the wheat from the chaff, or I should say the kernels from the chaff. So the act of removing milk from the animal is considered to be dash, considered to be threshing. So the Gemara says as follows, but yet when you drink directly from the udder of the animal, this is considered to be doing the malacha of mefarik or dash with a shinui, with a change. So the Gemara says Shabbos. So the Gemara says Shabbos, the Isra Skila. So Shabbos, where again, normally if you perform an act of dash, of mefarik, there's an Isra Skila, stoning. Gazu Rabbanon. In that case, Rabbanon were gozer. Yomtiv, De'ilu Lav, the Isra Lav, Yomtiv, where there's only a Lav, Lo Gazu Rabbanon. So we'll say that's the case. So therefore, Allah Lamaisa, Abishal says, we used to nurse, we used to drink directly from the animal on Yom Tiv. It was a case where there was tsar, where there was difficult, there was tsar. Therefore, again, it was an act of dash with a shinui on Yom Tiv, and it will be permitted. But on Shabbos, such a thing would not be permitted. Okay, Tashma, lo so we'll say the pasuk says over here, lo sochlum ki sheketzeim. Torah is talking about over here consumption of any creepy, crawly things. So the Torah says, don't eat it, because it is a sheketz. Because it is a sheketz, it's disgusting. To which the Gemara says something very interesting. Lo sochlum, ki sheketzeim, lo sachilum. The way you could also read that, Abba says, not just simply lo sochlum, but rather, not just don't eat it, but what? Don't feed it. Don't feed it. Teaching me that halacha l'maisa, I can't feed something prohibited to a child. This teaches me that halacha l'maisa, an adult can't go ahead and feed something not kosher to a child. My love, the amrlahu lo sochlu. So I will say, ultimately, again, is this not that I have an obligation? If I see the child eating something not kosher, that I have an obligation to step in and tell the child to stop? In other words, I will say, aren't we seeing over here that halacha l'maisa, I have an obligation to stop the child from eating something not kosher? This seems to contradict Rabbi Pedas. No. If I see the child doing it on their own, I can't actively feed the child something not kosher. But halacha l'maisa, if I see the child doing it on their own, I have no obligation to stop them from doing so. So the Gemara goes right there. Tashma, kol nefesh pichem lo sochal dam. Pasuk says, a person can't eat blood. So we'll say this comes to also tell me that adults are responsible for children. My love, the amrilahu lo sochlu. I will say, doesn't that mean that if I see my child eating blood, a lot of problems if I see my child eating blood. But Lamaisa again, if I see my child eating blood, I have an obligation to stop them. Contradicts Rabbi Pedas, to which the Gemara says, no. What it means is you can't feed your kid blood. That you can't do. Good to know. But again, if I see them eating it, I don't have an obligation to prevent them from doing so. So this supports Rabbi Pedas, to which the Gemara goes right to Tashma. Emor v'amarta lahasir gidolam ala ketanim. So I will say Parshas Emor. The Kohanim can't become tamei. So the Gemara says Emor, double lashon of Emor, teaches me that adults have an obligation to prevent children from becoming tamei. My love, Damar lo titamu. So I will say, doesn't this mean if I'm a Kohen and I see my kid running into a cemetery, I have to tell them, yell at them, stop, not yell at them, tell them nicely, stop, don't go into the cemetery? To which the Gemara says, no, what it means is that halacha l'maisa, I can't actively make my child tamei. But I both say, so therefore, again, it turns out, that we have three different halachas over here. Three different halachas, all seemingly teaching me the same exact thing, which is that halacha l'maisa, if I see my child doing something that is asur, I don't have an obligation to go ahead and step in and stop them. I'm just not permitted to what? Actively facilitate the performance of a love. That's what I can't do. Shabbos said the shaila is, why do I need three different things, three different limudim teaching me the same thing? I'll tell you, it's tricky. Gemara says, if you would have just told me the halacha by non-kosher, creepy, crawly things, that although if my kid's eating it, I don't have to stop them. But halacha l'mayis, I can't actively feed them. If you were to tell me that, I'll say amud beis mishum di isuran b'mashu. Because I'll say, here's the difference: is that ultimately, again, when it comes to shkatzim, ultimately, remember, even the tiniest amount is going to be asur. Aval dam da'adiika revius emalo. But I'll say dam, where again, I'm only chayiv for dam if you consume a revius of dam. Perhaps the halacha should not be like this. V'yashu dam mishum diika kares. If one just said dam, there's an iser kares. Aval shrotzim emalo, but by shrotzim it's a lav, not an iser kares. V'yashu hani tartif. We'll just say these two mishum the isurun shava bakol, because ultimately again their isra applies to everyone. In other words, shkatzim and dam, everyone has the din. Aval tuma, but tuma only applies to kohanim emalo. V'yashu tumas kohanim. Excuse me. If it were just said by tuma kohanim, shiny mishum deriba b'hen mitzvos yiseros, because kohanim have a lot of extra mitzvos. Hani emalo, but again, maybe by dam and by shkatzim, maybe not. Therefore, tzricha. Therefore, I need all three cases. Rabbi said, but I want to be clear. The common denominator amongst all three cases is what? That halacha l'maisa, I am not permitted to actively facilitate my child's commission of an avera, or for that matter, it doesn't have to be my kid, a katan's commission of an avera. So I can't feed a katan dam. I can't feed a katan shrotzim, and if I'm a Kohen, I can't drop off my kid for cemetery daycare, right? I can't go ahead and put the kid in the cemetery. That I can't do. But halacha l'maisa, if the child is eating blood on his own, eating shkatzim on his own, little Kohen is playing in the cemetery on his own, I am not obligated to intervene and stop that. And I both say, see, under normal circumstances, you think to yourself, why wouldn't I intervene? But l'maisa, if there is some benefit I am getting through the commission of this Aveira, I am permitted to get that benefit. I both say that is the position of Rabbi Pedas as espoused on Kof Yud Gimel Amud Beis, and that is how the Gemara is coming out. So let's go weiter. We're not finished. Tashma, Shnei Achen. I will say we're not back. It sounds like we're back to Yibum, but we're not yet back to Yibum. Watch this. Shnei Achen. You have two brothers. Echad Pikeach ve'echad Cheresh. One is a Pikeach, one is a Cheresh. Nisuin Shtei Achayos Pichos, married to two Pichos, two, we'll call it regular, typical sisters. Meis Cheresh Ba Pikacha. So we'll say, what happens if the Cheresh husband dies? Ma Yase Pikach Ba Pikachas. Ultimately, again, what should the other surviving brother, who's the Pikach married to the Pikachas, what should he do? Teitze Mishum Achos Ishta. So what's that? It's an easy case. No Yibum, no Chalitza. Why? Because wife's sister. Okay, now watch this. So the Gemara says, Meis Pikeach Ba Pikachas. What happens if the Pikeach husband married to the Pikachas dies? Ma Yase Cheresh Ba Pikachas. Motzias Ishto Beget. Ve'eshes Achiv Asura the Olam. So we'll say, so remember again, this is the interesting case where, remember, so now you have the Pikeach brother, typical brother, normal brother, married to normal wife. Okay, and now what happens? I'm sorry. Right now what happens? Now, so typical wife falls to the Cheresh surviving brother, right? And the Cheresh surviving brother himself is also married to a Pikacha. So we'll say, now what's my problem? My problem is the Cheresh's marriage to his Pikeach wife is a Derabanan, and yet Yibum is a Deoraisa. So what does he do? So in this case, Moties Ishta Beget, he has to divorce his wife with a get, right? The Eishes Achav Asur the Olam, but yet ultimately, again, the Yevamo will be Asar, ultimately as the sister of his divorcee. To which the Gemara says, but why? Why make the Cheresh divorce his wife? After all, again, Rabbi say, a Cheresh is like a katan. It's like a katan. And ultimately, Amai Motzias Ishtobeget, Tesiv Gabe, Katan Ochal Nevelosu. What a great shayla. Why do you make the Cheresh divorce his wife? Just leave him alone. A Cheresh is like a katan. We just got finished saying that a katan who's eating nevelos, a katan who's eating something not kosher, I'm not obligated to intervene. I can't facilitate the consumption. I can't encourage him to do it. I can't ask him to do it. But once he's doing it, it's fine. So why don't they say over here, let the Cheresh remain married to his wife, and we're done. To which the Gemara says, you're right. Here's the problem. Mishum Isura Dida. That works fine for the Cheresh. But in the case in question over here, the Cheresh is married to a Pikachas, a typical regular woman. She will have a problem in this marriage. Therefore, again, the divorce is really necessary for her. Good. Tashma, Shnei Achin Pichin Nisu and Shnei Achayos. So if you have two typical brothers, two regular brothers married to two regular sisters, I should say two sisters, Achas Pikachas v'Achas Chareshas. One is the Pikachas, one is the Chareshas. Meis Pikach ba'al Chareshas. If the Pikach husband dies, who's married to the Chareshas, Ma Yaseh Pikach ba'al Pikachas. What should the Pikach, the surviving Pikach brother, do? Easy. No problem. There's no Yibam, no Chalitza, because the Cheresh Yevama is the sister of his wife, and therefore, again, no Yibam, no Chalitza. Meis Pikach ba Pikachas. However, what happens if the Pikach brother dies? So now the Pikachas Yevama falls to her Pikach brother-in-law, who's married to the Chareshas. What should he do? Motzias ishta beget. He has to divorce his wife with the get, because ultimately, again, that's a rabbinic marriage. The Eishes achiv vechalitza. And he does chalitza with his sister-in-law. Va'amai motzias ishta beget. But same thing. Why does he have to divorce his wife? Let him remain married to his cheresh wife. She's like a katan or a kitana, and Allah Chamaisa, she has no problem staying in this marriage. To which the Gemara says, Tesiv gabe katan ochal velosu. He writes, says the Gemara mishum isura dida. In Achinami, Abba say, you're right, but here's the problem. I'm sorry, Yisroel Didei. Ultimately, again, the husband will have a problem. Else, the wife, there's no problem because she's a Chareshas, no problem. But the husband, who is a Pekeach, would have a problem remaining in this marriage. Beautiful. Says the Gemara, Omerava Tashma, Shnei Achin, Echad Cheresh, Ve'echad Pekeach, two brothers, one's a Cheresh, one's a Pekeach, Nesun L'Shnei Achayos, married to two sisters. Achas pikachas v'achas chareshas. So the cheresh is married to a chareshas. The pikach is married to a pikachas. Here we go. Meis cheresh ba'al chareshas. If the cheresh who's married to the chareshas dies, mayas pikach ba'al pikachas. So what should the surviving pikach yavam do? What should he do? That's an easy one. Teisi mishum achos ishto. No yibam, no chalitza, because it's his sister's wife. So I says, Meis pikach ba'al pikachas, mayas cheresh ba'al chareshas. But if the pikach husband dies, pikach brother dies, and now the pikach's wife falls to him, what should the cheresh brother do? Motias ishto beget, he divorces his wife with the get. The eishes achiv asru li olam, and ultimately again his sister, and the Yevamos ushered him forever. I v'ha the lav isura didaika, v'lav isura didei. Rabbi say, here's a case where both members of the couple are cheresh. If that's the case, why not just allow them to remain in the marriage? To which the Gemara says, so the Gemara says, so the lav isura didei ika, v'lav isura. Will get confused if you look at Rashi very quickly. Look at the last Rashi in the parak. Top of Kuf Yud Dalit, second line down. Mishum Gzera Atar Sivam L'Shuk Di Amrinon Teisiv Charesh as Gabe Cheresh Lo Yadi Inish the time of Mishum Katan Ochal Nevelos. I will say, if you allow them to remain remarried, the problem is going to come up is that Halacha Lamaisa, people won't realize the reason you're allowing them to remain married is because there's a Cheresh and a Chareshes. Rather, again, V'Savri the Kiddushin the day Dachul Zeka. They'll think that the Kiddushin of a Cheresh pushes aside the Zeka that he has to a Pikachas. And you could end up creating an incredibly wrong impression, a wrong understanding when it comes to Yibam. That's what they have to say. Therefore, Rabbi say, again, just to kind of bring this together, Halacha l'maiseh, Rabbi say, you should just know, we paskin like Rabbi Pedas. We paskin Rabbi Pedas. Or we paskin like the idea of Katan Ochal Nevelos. If you see a child committing an Avera, and Rabbi say, let's be honest, I, the adult, may be benefiting from that Aveira, I have no obligation to stop them. No obligation to stop them. But halacha l'maisa will say, but halacha l'maisa, what can't I do? Number one, I obviously can't actively encourage. That's Aleph. And Bays, even without actively encouraging, if it's clear that the child is doing this because the child knows that this is what I, the adult, want, I am obligated to shut that down as well. They will say, incredible halacha. Mazel tov, hadrin aloch cheresh. I will say, wow, so beautiful to finish a parak. Ultimately on Rosh Chodesh and Emir Hashem, B'Shato Mazachas. I look forward to being back with you live tomorrow morning, Emir Hashem, and Emir will be zocha to begin the new parak on Aleph Tammuz. I will say, Shkoyach, incredible daf, incredible day, and a good Chodesh.